But so what? I mean, if Jesus does exist, what was his lineage?
Well, that's really hard to. I mean, you can follow the genealogy that's in Genesis, and you can follow it down from Adam, and you can do it from there. But going up, you can only get so far down, and going up from Joseph, as soon as you get to Joseph's dad, like it's fucked up from there on out. And there are no coinciding names from there on out up until you get to the end of the genealogy of Genesis.
Okay.
This is the thing that bothers me the most about Christianity, and that is this Trinity thing. It makes zero sense in terms when you have, in the verses where it's, either Jesus talking to God or vice versa, and you have people that will try to tell you they're the same person. They're one and the same. And so then you have the questions of, is he sacrificing himself to himself when he's on the cross saying, why have you forsaken me? Did he forsake himself? Like, is he, how does that make sense? What's your opinion on that?
I mean, that's also really really controversial. I mean, you're talking about his last words. Before Jesus died, in Mark and Matthew, are the only two that coincide with each other as far as Jesus' last words. And for the people who claim that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and even John were written by first-hand eyewitnesses, then I don't know how they would get such important details about such an important figure of a belief that they subscribe to so much, almost cult-like. As a matter of fact, that it was a cult at the time. It was considered a cult by the Romans. So in Mark and Matthew, before Jesus died, he cries out in anguish. He said, my Father, why have you forsaken me?" Like you said. But in Matthew, the very next book to be written after Mark, Jesus' last words are where Mark ends at Mark 16:8. Oh dang it! I gotta look it up. I'm
That's cool.
trying to remember the exact wording of that one.
You don't have the entire
I
Bible
kind of,
memorized, chapter and verse.
yeah. What are you thinking?
I've got quite a
Wow.
bit of it
We gave you
memorized.
plenty of time to prepare. You had 24 hours to memorize this.
Right,
We used
absolutely,
to have to
man.
say. I wonder how far I could get in the books. We used to have to say the books of the Bible in Sunday school: Genesis,
Oh, hell
Exodus,
no.
Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, First and Second Samuel, First and Second Kings, First and Second something, Ezra,
Chronicles.
Nehemiah. Yeah, Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah. That's as far as I
Yeah,
can
I'm
get.
right there with
That's
you,
still a
man.
lot
I'm right
better
there
than I
with you.
thought. That's still a lot better than I thought.
Oh yeah,
Um,
not bad at all. Not bad at
we
all.
we had to growing up or for around Christmas time. It was around this time actually. Every year, the kids would have to they would get a verse that they would go up in front of the church at the Christmas program that they would do. The older kids got to be in a play, but the younger kids, because they couldn't be trusted with the parts in the play, would just get a verse. You just go up there and say, a verse or whatever. And everybody, I was hectic in Sunday school. I used to give the Sunday school teacher so much hell, and everybody would get these short verses, like these just real quick one line, one sentence verses. The time that I went there, she gave me Psalms 100, the entire Psalms 100.
Wow.
Yes, I had to do the entire thing, and so my mom would make me stay up after doing homework and all that, and go over this verse. And I mean, I knocked it out of the park, but I, I never forgave her for that, and I still to this day do not. Pat,
Jeez.
I don't forgive you,
Jeez.
Pat.
Oh man, that's awful. That's awful.
But I digress. Go ahead, Jim.
I wouldn't be able to do that. I
Oh,
never have those memorized.
well, I can't remember the verse, but I was reminded of something else that isn't a contradiction that's often purported to be one, and that's the time that Jesus was crucified. Because John says something a little bit different than the synoptic gospels do, than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all say that it was at the ninth hour when Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Or my Father, why have you forsaken me?" I think it's Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, or something like that.
Sounds right.
And so they're saying that at about the sixth hour, or it's about the ninth hour, Jesus died, which is what is it, like 3 p.m. or something like that. I believe that they started counting hours when the sun rose, so however many hours that was from the time the sun came up. And in John, it says that it was on the third hour, I believe, that he died, and so everybody was like, "Oh, well, this is different." They said he was crucified at this time. They said he was crucified at this time. Like, what's going on here? Like, why is there a difference? But it's because John was written so much later than they were. They had a completely different method of counting time where he was, and you have to remember, these weren't written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So this wasn't an apostle. This is when these texts are analyzed. John comes from a completely different country, just by the way it's written, by the grammar that it's used, by the syntax, contextual clues, historical evidence, what it's written on. Even there's just so much evidence pointing to these gospels. The only accounts of Jesus being the Son of God and a miracle worker and here to die for our sins, and these people who claimed, I don't want to say that they claim to be the authors, because they really don't, because Luke, from the very beginning of Luke says that he's just passing on the oral traditions of people before him. But I mean, it's very clear that the way that they're written, even verbatim sometimes, that they're both sourced from the same document. So they're both sourced from the same written document, written at some other point before them. Some people theorize, I'm sure you've heard, Steve, the Q document, or the Quail document. Is
that a Mormon thing?
No, it's kind of it's a theory. No, it's a theory that for whatever doesn't match up with Mark, in Matthew and Luke, that whatever that other information came from this other document, this other Q document. As a matter of fact, most modern day scholars kind of dismiss that, and they just say that they are sourced from other documents, but it's not any one particular document, but rather some historical documents, some personal anecdotes. Some even say that John was written by either an apostle or somebody who knew the apostle, and it would have to be somebody who knew the apostle, because it would have been 100 or so years after that the apostle died.
I forgot what I was going to say. What was I going to say, Steve?
I haven't heard anything. I have no idea what the Q document is. I mean, the only thing that I remember, something like, what is it, GDPMHQ or something, where they had like 4 different authors of the Genesis. But yeah, I'm not familiar with.
Yeah. And there's a whole alphabet. There's A and B even. I mean, it's and another thing that points to these. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, please.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say that another thing that points to these documents not being factual, or not being firsthand accounts of apostles walking with Jesus and documenting his words, the words in red that are attributed to Jesus that he said verbatim. These people who followed Jesus around, they spoke Aramaic, and most of them, we know, because it says in the Bible, were illiterate. Simon was illiterate. Peter was illiterate. They were fishermen, and these original documents that were later translated into Hebrew and into other languages, they were all originally written in what's called Koine Greek. And Koine Greek is an ancient type of Greek that was only written by like very prestigious people, like very wealthy people. This was not a commoner's language, and much less a fisherman's language. Fishermen at that time, they didn't know how to write their name. They would sign X's, I'm sure, or deltas or whatever. I don't know. But they certainly weren't literate enough to be a scribe or to document their travels with Jesus in any way. So we know for a fact that these are all at least secondhand accounts, if not third, fourth, or fifth, or even if they're accounts at all. It's okay. So you've heard the analogy like a game of telephone. You start off with something, and by the time you get to the end, something completely different, right? So, and the person at the end's like trying to figure out like, oh man, like what did that guy at the front say? Like, what did he say? Like, trying to figure out what he said. So let's just say that the guy at the front was trying to tell the guy at the back where a jar of cookies is, and if he can figure out where the jar of cookies are at the end of the game of telephone, he gets to go and enjoy the jar of cookies. And so the guy at the front starts off with where the jar of cookies are, and by the time they get around to the guy at the end, he has no idea what in the hell that they're saying, and it's all muddled up and mush. And he's like, "What? What's in the flood? It's a what? Where is it?" And he's sitting there trying to figure it out. But if the guy at the front started off just saying some bullshit, and he wasn't actually saying where the jar of cookies were, then the guy at the end is wasting his time trying to determine what he said. So if these stories are made up and with miracles and all this other stuff, and Jesus praying in the garden by himself, yet somehow somebody recorded what he said in the garden while he was praying to himself by himself, it's really convenient. So I guess my point I'm trying to make with that analogy is that if the stuff that the Bible purports to be true, if we can know that these details are off, and that they truly do contradict each other, meaning that they cannot both logically exist simultaneously and both be true, then it's what's the point in trying to figure out what the guy at the front said? It's
it's kind of confusing all around, right? Well, somebody who just I have a friend who's an Orthodox Jew. I'm not going to say who he is because he's an Orthodox Jew, and he may not want people to know that, but he's very erudite. And he says the JDPD has to do with the Torah. The Q document is a theoretical document to explain text shared between Matthew, Luke, but not found in Mark. And he also says, just want you to know you were on point about adoptionism. I don't know what the hell I even said about adoptionism, so I don't know how I can be on point because adoptionism makes no sense to me. But whatever I said, he agrees I was on point with that. So,
also in the live chat, Jim, someone said you'll appreciate this. Someone said that it was Eric Mishima. He said, for some reason I want Jim and Digital Hammurabi to do something, and then he put in parentheses educational together. So I think that should be in the future for you guys. It'd be a good collab.
Absolutely.
You and Dr. Josh actually would be a pretty good pair to get together, I think.
Right. Oh, so, I remembered Jesus' last words in Luke, son of a bitch. And this is one of the most common.
That was his words, son of a bitch.
Those are some hell. If you're getting crucified, that's probably the best thing to go with. Son of a bitch.
I don't blame Jesus at all, man.
Yeah, but you can't exactly slap your thigh though. You're like,
too soon.
Son of a bitch.
Too soon.
All right, we're getting demonetized for that. That's damn sure.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, so like I said, in Matthew and Mark, Eli, lama sabachthani, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then cried out in a loud voice, lowered his head, and he gave up the ghost. In Matthew and Mark. Now in Luke, same thing. Jesus is in anguish. He's crying. He's screaming, just like in Matthew and Mark. And he looks up. He cries out and says, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." and he gave up the ghost. That's what it says in Luke, and gave up the ghost. And
to himself.
And Luke is also the only one who